Alan Wake is an action-adventure game developed by Remedy Entertainment and released on the Xbox 360 in 2010. Originally a 360 exclusive, how well did the Green Team's console handle this psychological thriller and its immersive fog and lighting effects? We're going to take a quick look at my physical copy, and then we'll jump right into some gameplay to find out. Alright, let's get into it.
Alan, I'm upstairs. I have a surprise for you.
Ooh, yes ma'am, can do. Oh yeah, pants on the railing. It's go time, boys.
Well, hello there.
I'm not the surprise. It's in the study. Go take a look.
Aw, man.
Stephen King once wrote that nightmares exist outside of logic, and there's little fun to be had in explanations. They're antithetical to the poetry of fear.
Alan Wake's story follows the namesake character, a famous best-selling author named Alan Wake who's been facing some writer's block for a couple of years and is looking to get away from it all with his wife for a bit of R&R in a small, remote mountain town where, as we all know, nothing bad could possibly happen. Except, oopsie, his wife is stolen by spooky darkness and cast into the mysterious lake. The scene cuts, and we catch up with Alan as he wakes up a week later, in a car crash with no memory of the week prior. But now he keeps finding pages to a novel he doesn't even remember writing, making it clear that he's living out the story of one of his books. This is very much one of those, wait, are the bizarre locals crazy, or is my character delusional? Twists and turns kind of story, and it's fun. If perhaps a touch silly at times with some convenient plot points. For example, at one point we meet God, and God gives us a flashlight and a handgun while explaining the combat mechanics to us. Thank you, God. But was this all really just a dream? Wow, it's getting deep already.
That is all. I will give you back your dream now.
If you like nostalgic content, consider subscribing. We're aiming at 1,000 subscribers right now. And check out the playlist in the description below for more. Alan Wake was Remedy's first game after working on the Max Payne series for over half a decade. They'd found great success in the original Max Payne, and as part of the deal selling the franchise to Rockstar, produced the sequel Max Payne 2 immediately after, and on a much tighter timeline. Understandably, writer Sam Lake and the development team over at Remedy wanted to work on something totally different after grinding the linear Max Payne for so long, and they decided on an open-world survival game. But wait, Alan Wake isn't an open-world survival game, I hear you saying. Well, the inspiration for the game came from TV thrillers and Stephen King novels. The game even opens with a Stephen King quote, and development had proceeded for over 3 years before it became pretty clear open-world survival was just not going to work for the action thriller story they wanted to tell. Instead of scrapping the project, in the span of just 2 months prior to release, the team chopped up the game and created a hyperlinear, chapter-based game, and as it turned out, this is kind of the perfect fit. The inspirational material being the episodic TV thrillers and chapter-based thriller novels made the restructuring objectives pretty clear. And the story of Alan Wake plays out much like the chapters in an action thriller novel. Much like the comic strips between the chapters in Max Payne, which themselves were somewhat born originally from a lack of resources to film the cutscenes, the formula ends up being somewhat unintentionally brilliant, and resulted in another cult favorite. Remedy definitely did a solid job polishing this game up for the 360. These older consoles in their limited memory capacity always have a hard time juggling demanding visual effects, particularly those that have any perceived physical volume to them. And Alan Wake possesses a few of these, such as fog, kind of pseudo-volumetric lighting, dramatic shadows in the dark environments. Remedy did a great job here working with the hardware to balance all of these effects out such that the creepy, remote rural town vibes and the dark forest jaunts felt appropriately, hauntingly atmospheric without tanking performance. And I've just got to say, the directing of these scenes really does a good job of making you feel like you're playing through a psychological thriller show. The vibes are perfect. That said, this game is running at 30 FPS at 540p resolution, so there's a blurred jagginess to the upscale visuals that isn't always the most flattering. Character models feel a bit waxy, and their animations feel pretty stiff and behind the times for what I would expect from a game released in 2010. All in all, though, still a good-looking game. They prioritize their resources toward atmosphere, and for a game in this genre, I think that's the right choice. Admittedly, the audio didn't wow me with some incredible score, and characters were unreasonably hard to hear when they're speaking if you aren't directly facing them. But Remedy made a creative choice here to keep the ambient noise and music to a minimum for most of the story beats and tension-inducing scenes, and this quote-unquote lack of audio feedback actually serves to increase the tension. This overall sound design choice works really well for this type of game, and it helps sell the game's creepy action thriller vibe. Plus, the game gets a bonus point because this is absolutely using the same locked door sound effect from the Max Payne games. In intense scenes, the audio picks up tremendously, with the physical impact of the powerful darkness slamming into things with some real punch. And the heart-racing thrill of battle sequences definitely gets the pulse going. And hey, later on there's also an over-the-top rock concert scenario where you torch the enemies with stage pyrotechnics and stage lighting. It's hilarious and a great contrast to the otherwise intentionally muted tone. We follow Alan Wake for the entirety of the playthrough, flipping between cutscenes, low-input sections of kind of mash the A button gameplay meant primarily to advance the plot, and full-on combat sections that become more prevalent as the game progresses. The attention to ambient details surrounding us as we progress, like overhearing chatter in the diner, to recurring radio station broadcasts, even the Night Springs TV show, clearly a play on Bright Falls, the town we're staying in, is just so very Remedy, and it's akin to Lords and Ladies and Address Unknown in Max Payne, if you're familiar. Hell, we even hear Max Payne himself at one point as James McCaffrey, may he rest in peace, voices another character. The meta-commentary sprinkled in is fun for fans of Remedy games, and it helps further flesh out the experience for the player. There's another series that's essentially a broadcast of Alan's descent into madness, further mirroring the insane TV ramblings you'll find in Address Unknown, in Max Payne, and proof positive of the insanity inference that we're being half convinced is the overarching plotline. I won't spoil the final plot reveals, but it's cool to see the madness echoed through the broadcasts again, just like in Max Payne, in true Remedy fashion. Being trapped in a mind-bending nightmare has just become a Remedy staple at this point.
Here, take the light.
The game handles well enough. It remains quite linear in its story and level design, as discussed earlier, to guide you from episode to episode. It can feel a little slow at certain points where there's some long, forced walking sections while a character does an exposition dump, but the real annoyance that builds over time is the combat. Okay, the overall idea for combat is cool. You shine your light at them, you wait for the circle to close down until you hit a vulnerability threshold. You can focus the beam on the enemy to make the circle close faster, but it drains your battery, and then you just blast them with your gun. I like the design choice, that trying to grind through enemies quickly by focusing the beam to speed up the circle process and stop the onslaught that's coming at you, it costs you your light, which is both crucial for all combat, but also serves as a beacon of safety thematically in the game and psychologically for us players. And even the characters. Alice, Alan's wife, is notably afraid of the dark. This is a nice touch. If enemies get too close, you can pop a flare as a temporary safety bubble of light to ward off attackers as a functional reset button if you're getting swarmed. That said, it gets fairly repetitive, and it doesn't control particularly well. Like it all, honestly, the skill ceiling essentially caps in the first combat encounter as aim light well, then aim gun well, and don't run out of battery. I mean, that's about it. It lacks much nuance or progression beyond that. You do eventually get some new weapons, like the flare gun that's basically a nuclear bomb, but nothing that fundamentally changes the gameplay of shoot them with awkward to control light, then shoot them with gun. Some of the enemies are just spastic, teleporting garbage designs as well, and quite often you'll be hit by random, seemingly unavoidable ranged throwing axes that bonk your health down to a state of vulnerability in large combat encounters. It's not really fun. This could have been polished more, I think, but the overall design of combat has a cool concept. That's just not enough to prevent it from feeling like a bit of a drag at times, increasingly so as the game progresses and stagnates in this area. Honestly, they had to cut somewhere, and it was in the resolution being displayed, and not the performance, thankfully. We hold a semi-steady 30 FPS here, usually not dipping and demanding sequences below 25 frames per second, and that ends up feeling pretty serviceable for an Xbox 360 title. 7th gen action games that require aiming or precise inputs are going to frequently be docked points for the game's performance, hindering your ability to effectively participate with the game's action combat system. But thankfully that's not really the case here. It felt fine to play through the game, even the combat, from a strictly performance-centered point of view. For me, personally, Alan Wake, on a scale of 10, is a solid 6 or 7 out of 10 experience. I think the vibe of the game is on point with what they were looking to present. They nailed the atmosphere, and the injection of TV thriller cheese and classic Remedy meta-commentary and plot twists was refreshing for an insufferably obsessed Max Payne fan like myself. Held back perhaps a touch by mid-tier visuals and some somewhat subpar combat design, I think it's still a game that most fans of story-driven action games are going to love. If you, unlike myself, are a bit more into psychological thrillers and novels, you'll appreciate the details in this game a bit more, I think, maybe pick up a few more references, and then it'd end up getting a bump to a rock-solid 7 to 7.5 out of 10, I'd imagine, and it'd be a great pickup for you. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe, and check out the playlist in the description below for more. Thanks for watching.
This really ought to be fixed, and then I must change the lights.
Even that sounds better than your singing.